to see how well my internet does, I tried to switch the bit rate and refresh rate, whatever it means, with the mic. Switched everything to 16-bit. The mic was on 24. Yeah, it was on 24 48K, and then the music was on 16 or something. I don't know. I just put everything at 48 because I can't lower the mic any lower than 48. It's either 16 or 24-bit. And I was doing a little bit of research saying that you have to mix it, or you have to keep it the same. I don't know enough. And I also messed with the on the wavelength, because my internet seemed okay. I still had a few settings where I added an extra router and it messed up, and just with the QoS, with like pretty much who comes first in line, and the TV downstairs was at the same level as this, which I don't want because they're streaming down there. I don't want any pull on this when I'm live. This is private right now, but I might let it go. I don't know, we'll see. It's gonna be dumb anyway. I'm just running video through it, and to see what it does, makes any popping noise, stuff like that, and just kind of really stress the system to see what it does. But my point was, oh, not that. I need in here on this wheel. Now on the newer, most updated Elgato Wave 3 software, there's no input buffer, output buffer setting. So I actually did some research where you just download the older one and it still has it, and people are complaining about it. And I adjusted the input buffer. I had it very large on the input, and then the output buffer I had it small, which was default, because if I do too much buffer, my voice in the audio might not match too well. It's another reason why I'm doing this here, this little intro talking, just to see how it looks. If I look close enough, it's fine. So I have it at medium. I bumped this up and then I bumped this down just so it's not taking too long, but the output I bumped up just so that there's not a default. I did this before and it really helped whenever I first got the Elgato working. But then there's just, you know, a few things that else that I could do to help with it. I think it's the microphone just really just doing too much. And then whenever I go and switch things, and maybe the bit rate, I don't know. I just don't know. I look at Kicker's streams and it's spotless, and anyone else's, and it's just like, come on, man. So we'll see how it works, one step at a time. We're gonna get this right. I will not stop. Anyway, another thing I was thinking that I could do was for the music. This is 117 megabytes. I know it's not a lot, and it's like an hour, but I was thinking maybe it's just too much for the Elgato to process and play. You know what I mean? Like chunk at a time. It's just too much. It's a lot, and that's why I have to mess with the input buffer. Because if I don't do background music, I don't think it pops. I don't really think it will. I think it has something to do with the mix, the fresh rate, the whatever. I don't know. Anyway, what I was thinking about doing was maybe just making it smaller, like half the size. See if it makes a difference there, and it shouldn't suffer the quality too much. Plus, it's background music. It's not like you're playing as loud as you can in your car, so that's fine. And I did notice on the stream tonight that it was a little bit loud, so I cranked that down to 55 instead of 65. This is some Andy's extra stuff, man. I don't know, it's pretty cool. But let me pull up a video to watch. I know another thing I gotta do, or I already have it, is I have a second browser just so that I don't get interference. If I try to play something on this browser over here, you either won't hear sound, or if I play it, you'll hear an echo, which is a pain in the butt when you have someone else on. So what I do is I use a second browser, and then I have its own microphone, which is actually right here, Google Chrome, and it doesn't mess with that, just because StreamYard is on this one. And that's just a pain in the butt with this stuff, man. I swear to God, if anyone else needs help streaming, please don't let me waste all this information that I'm learning. If you need help, let me know. It's not a competition. So let's go to just look up YouTube. I don't even know what this is. Man, you know, Bear Vids makes some really good videos. And see if he's got a playlist so we can just play through the playlist. Boom or bust, play all. Yeah, that sounds right. Now we should have audio coming out.
Hey, this is finally here,
Yeah, we
Season
got
'1,
audio. You might hear a
Episode
little
1
bit of an echo
of
'cause I
Boom
got
or
my,
Bust, the show where you
Kicker
design
IK
subwoofer
100
enclosures,
playing,
I 3D print them,
but
and we
figured
put them
let's
up
just,
head to
let
head to see
something
whose
play,
design is the
and we'll play
loudest.
through all of
Now,
them.
seeing as this is the first episode,
see what
those
it
of you
does.
who haven't
And,
watched
I'm
my
gonna go
videos
walk
leading up to this
downstairs,
won't
check
have
on
a
my
clue
fish
what's
tanks
going
'cause
on, so
they're,
we're going to talk through a
unloading.
little bit more in
And I'm just
detail
gonna
about
watch this
everything that
with
we're
you
doing,
guys.
and a test that we're
You know,
making in this
watch it
episode,
live. I
more
think
so
I
than
can
in
do
future
that. I don't know
episodes,
if I can
provided
buy it.
you'll already have an idea
But
as to what's
actually,
going on.
see if
I
can
asked you
do
guys,
that
my
here.
audience, to design
Send
me
the
some
link to it.
subwoofer enclosures on 3D
YouTube
CAD for a
Studio,
12-inch subwoofer scaled down by a factor
content,
of 6 for a
live,
2-inch
showing
driver
up
here.
live right
I am
now.
then going to 3D print them and place them in this
it's giving
test
them a-
cabin volume which we've got here, which simulates a average car vehicle cabin, and we're going to run a bunch of frequencies on them and take an average and see whose design plays the best across a range of frequencies which would best simulate a good demo box for music and listening. Now your first question might be, hang on a minute, how does that work? Does this really scale properly? Well, yes, actually. Acoustics and enclosures and the way that sound flows through air is just fluid dynamics, and it scales absolutely perfectly. So a small box like this playing a higher frequency, when scaled up into a larger box, it'll play the exact same characteristics with the exact same response, just at a lower frequency. So for this test, all we've got to do is scale the frequencies, the volumes and the dimensions, the cabin here, and yeah, we're pretty much good to go. The only things that don't quite scale correctly are materials. As materials get smaller and bigger, their properties kind of change in a non-linear way. So it's actually quite difficult to find a small scaled version of what would otherwise be a kind of mid-range 12-inch subwoofer. But after hours of research, the driver that I've chosen here, I think will work perfectly for this test and will allow you to fine-tune an enclosure in this scaled format and then bring it up into a bigger size, and it will work just as well. The driver that we're using for these tests is a little 2-inch by Peerless. The TS parameters and specifications are all in the document linked below. It has a 0.8-inch voice coil which will accept about 15 watts RMS clamped. It's got about 1.5mm of XMAX, which scales to about 8mm, and its XMEC or mechanical limits are quite considerably more than that. It has an FS of around 130Hz, which when scaled up to a 12-inch sub will be about 21Hz. So think about this woofer similar to a Hertz, a Morel, JL Audio, Focal, with about 500 to 600 watts RMS, nice soft suspension, low FS, so it work well in sealed or fourth order, with about 8mm of XMAX. So you don't want to be making your boxes really big because this woofer will just unload and not sound like great. In order for there to be a 2-inch driver that exists that would scale to a decent 12-inch subwoofer, it would need to have a 0.5-inch coil that can take about 30 to 50 watts RMS, and generally drivers in this size are designed for full range, which obviously subwoofers aren't. So a perfectly scaled 2-inch driver would only maybe play up to around 800 Hertz mark, which would be fine because you can take a 0.5-inch voice coil, make it heavy with lots of copper, and it would be fine. But yeah, generally 2-inch drivers are designed for full range, so they're going to have much lighter voice coils than a scaled subwoofer would do in this size. The voice coil in this, being 0.8 inches, actually scales to about a 4.5-inch coil, which is why I say think of something similar to a Morel driver with a massive sort of 5-inch coil but a low power handling, kind of like an SQ driver. For testing your models head to head, we obviously have the scaled cabin volume here, which I have scaled down from a typical average vehicle cabin volume. So this right here is 19.68 litres, which when scaled up would equate to about 150 cubic foot of cabin volume. This has a standing wave resonance of about 180 Hz, which scales to about 40-45 Hz, and it has a Helmholtz resonance with the door open on this side at about 147 Hz, which is kind of similar to 23-25 Hz with one door open in the cabin, which is what you'd expect to see. So for this first episode, and to kind of set a benchmark, we're going to be testing a really simple aero-ported box that I have thrown together for today. Its specs are 2.7 scaled cubic foot net after the aero-port displacement, and it's tuned to about 27 scaled Hertz, which is, in reality, it's 0.35 litres, and it has a tuning frequency of 164 Hz. So to scale between this and a 12-inch version, you need to multiply the volume by 216, which is 6 cubed, as it's a volume, so it's cubic. And for tuning frequency, since that's one-dimensional, we only need to divide it by 6. So we take 164 divided by 6 gets us about 27. So let's get started and kick things off with an impedance sweep using DATS V2. Now, since this is a standard ported box, the impedance curve has 2 spikes with a valley in the middle. The box is applying the heaviest load to the cone and holding it dead still, transferring the most energy into air displacement from the port at this value here. This is the box tuning frequency. If you want to learn exactly how ported boxes work and how they do this, I recommend watching my video where I explain it here really well. This lower impedance spike here signifies where the port stops working, and it's allowing the front and rear waves from the cone to wrap around and meet each other, therefore cancelling. The port stops working, the woofer doesn't really have any cone control at this point, there's no air spring inside the box, and it's very similar to free air. It gets closer to just being out of the box entirely. That's why you have this big impedance spike here, because the cone is moving very freely with no load applied to it. As we move up in frequency from this lower impedance spike, we get to this valley, which is the box tuning frequency, where the port is converting the maximum amount of energy from the cone into air displacement out of the port. And as we increase the frequency further, we get to another impedance spike. Now, between these 2 points, the port also gradually stops working, but instead of allowing the waves to wrap around and cancel, the port actually kind of disappears and almost closes off, turning the enclosure into more like a sealed box. This now sealed style volume has an air spring inside, which itself will have a frequency it loves to resonate at with the drivers. So that's why we get this second impedance spike here, because the air spring is now aiding the movement from the cone, and it becomes very easy then for the cone to move in and out freely, creating this peak in impedance. As we go up further still in frequency, this air spring now resonates outside of what the cone is playing, therefore the cone is now working against the air spring, not in phase with it, and therefore it's harder to move. So yeah, a very typical looking impedance curve from this standard ported box, and I'm sure some of your designs will have all kinds of wacky, crazy impedance curves that we can go into detail and analyze. Cool, that was interesting. Right, now let's shove an RTA mic in front of its face and see how this is colouring the input signal, if at all. So I literally downloaded REW for this series. I've never used it before, and so I'm not that experienced with it, and it's many features. However, this is the response SPL graph and phase graph from 16.6 centimeters away from the driver, which is 1 meter scaled. Not sure if that makes any difference in this case, but you see this is a sweep from 120 Hz, which is 20 scaled Hertz, to 600 Hz, which is 100 scaled Hertz. You can see that out in the open air like this, not in the vehicle cabin, we have 80 dBs here down at 120, that's 20 Hertz. By the time we get to box tuning frequencies, that should be up at the 164 mark, which is right about there. You can see, yeah, there's a bit of a bump there. It seems to actually have response down to sort of 140, then there's a dip between 150 and 160. But remember, this is pointed directly at the cone rather than at the port, so maybe that has something to do with it. I'm probably going to be kind of learning this along with you guys as we continue, but I thought it'd be interesting to RTA each box anyway, even though I don't necessarily know exactly what I'm looking at here. So above box tuning, 160, we go up to a nice peak at 200 Hertz. Then it remains relatively flat through 200 to 300 Hertz. Little bit of a dip at 350, but relatively flat-ish, getting a bit noisier as we go up to the 600 mark. But yeah, I'll let you interpret this however you like. Some of you are probably thinking, hey, put it in a test cabin and run REW again, but that's my hint towards how this box is going to perform in this test, and we'll want to wait till later to find that out. Okay, awesome. Now on to the fun part. Let's turn the amplifier on and crank up some bass demos with this and see how it sounds.
I'm just going to keep this going just so if there are any audio glitches from the mic glitches, I think that's the main deal here with the background music. Now I got the link here, I should be able to see it. This video is private. There we go. Now we're cooking. Pain in the butt. And for some reason my little window is small. No, it's not. Now it is, but it's fine. It'll go back whenever I shut off the 810 Mini. That's fine. Sleep. It's good. It's better that way.
Yeah, man, that was freaking awesome. So those tracks are actually played at 6 times speed, recorded in high frame rate, and then slowed down again in editing. So that's how this gives the impression of looking and sounding like a real full-size bass demo from a 12-inch sub, but while working with the scales and frequencies that we're actually testing with here. And to be honest, I'm actually really impressed with how it's kind of performing and scaling. Like, that's about the amount of kind of air movement you'd get out of the door open from like a single 12-inch. I mean, this is like the perfect cabin. No real vehicle cabin is kind of this solid and this sealed with no leaks. So, okay, so now the moment we've all been waiting for. What kind of numbers does this thing throw up on the meter? If I was to hazard a guess based on real world sizes, a single 12-inch 500-600 watts RMS but getting that clamped, so a 1K amplifier in like a really strong stiff cabin, I'd imagine given that this box is designed to play a bandwidth rather than a single frequency, we might get somewhere between 136 to 138 dBs across the board, especially on the lower frequencies near to where this is tuned to. Now to measure the dBs, we're actually using an SPL lab sensor. What we're reading here is actual real dBs, not scaled, because we've scaled everything else about this project, so the actual measured pressure levels will be the same as if this was scaled up in real life. So if this does a 138 on the meter, if you scaled up this exact setup with this exact driver, it would also do around 138 dBs at the scale frequency. If I can manage to find a 2-inch driver that better resembles a scaled 12-inch sub, something that can accept 30 to 50 watts RMS, then that would be really cool, and we would definitely expect to see beyond 140, maybe like 142 dBs from this kind of setup. So let's slow time down and send it in the lanes. So as you should already know, the 4 scale frequencies that we're going to test are 25 Hz, 33 Hz, 45 Hz and 60 Hz. These 4 frequencies cover the normal range of bass frequencies you'd want your subwoofer to be good at playing at for a wide variety of music. 25 Hz is pretty low on the low end, and 60 Hz is kind of high on the high end for a lot of car subs to really play nicely, but this is really going to show up good box designs that can play basically whatever kind of music you throw at them. So we're going to start with 25 Hz, and this is closest to where my little ported box here is tuned to. I was going for the bandwidth idea being that it will load the port on the lower frequency and then hopefully act more like a sealed box higher up, rather than tuning at like 33 or 35 and just basically unloading at 25. That being my average down. And that's how we're scoring this, by the way. Those 4 frequencies, we're going to take an average of them. So multiply them together and divide by 4 to get one average score of all 4 frequencies. So, no idea how this is going to go. Let's hit play on 25 Hz, and I'm going to turn the volume up on this amplifier until one of 2 limits are reached. Either we reach 15 watts clamped to the voice coil of this speaker, which is shown by this little power meter here that I've installed, or if I deem that the woofer reaches mechanical excursion limit by means of a change in the audio tone. We also might see up on the oscilloscope here that it looks kind of, the waveform doesn't look so good, or we might hear some backplating or something, but basically mechanical limit or 15 watts RMS clamped to the coil is our limit here. 25 Hz, let's see what she's got. Okay, that was 15.7 watts on the screen, and what the what the? Whoa, 145 dBs? Okay, I've actually thought about it for a bit, and I've got a perfect explanation for why this is. I'll explain this in a bit, but let's do the rest of the 3 tones and see if we can get anywhere close to that. That is ridiculous. Okay, so 33 scaled hertz now. I suspect we're not going to be as loud because that was pretty much bang on box tuning frequency there. So that's also the Helmholtz mode of this cabin here is about 142 hertz. So yeah, that 150 hertz with the 145 was a combination of box tuning, a bunch of power, and also Helmholtz mode of this enclosure. The kind of quarter waves or the standing wave resonance is 180, so that should help with our 33 scaled hertz a little bit, because that's 198, so it's close enough. Let's see how we do on 33. Okay, there's 15 watts and also pretty much mechanical excursion limit, a 138, so that is a huge difference. So with 45, I'm kind of expecting to reach mechanical limit first. We'll have a look and we'll...
Looks good. Got it on my phone over here. And it looks good. It looks good. I don't know. The last maybe check here would be to see how far my voice is off. Again, I can go over to here. Oh, that's there. We'll save that because I might do a second run here. Let me subtract that. Okay, live music is still going. It sounds louder because I'm talking quiet. I talk loud. I try to. Anyway, the only other thing I might do, because it looks like it's a tad bit off, this input buffer, I might put as medium, but I always heard to stagger these. I don't know. There's nothing. There is nothing on this Elgato. Like, it's very vague, but I think that would work if this audio is delayed a little bit too much. I mean, not everyone's really watching every single word coming out of your mouth, but you kind of want it to be not really delayed like that, you know, because it would just kind of throw you off. But I feel like that fixed it. We'll see. SJC says there's nothing when it's live, so I mean, if there's nothing then there's live, that's okay, but I still know people rewatch this stuff, and it's like it on Facebook and YouTube, so it's always the same. You know, people watching it. It's not just Facebook. I thought it was just Facebook. No, it's not. I thought it was the computer. It's not the computer. It's not the internet. But I was glitching the other day. I seem to be okay now, but again, like I said, I mess with the internet settings, plus everyone's in bed, so that is a variable too. God, variables. But either way, I hope this works. I wanted to stop the popping. We'll see on the playback of this. I'm going to make this public so you guys can see it. Mostly SJC and the guys that are involved with my internet and, you know, streaming fun stuff. But either way, I'm going to end this, and yeah, I'm going to look at it and see how it goes. I'm just going to take a look at it and say, would you look at that? Oh man, Andy's extras always. All right, guys, I'll see you on. Wait, you know what? We forgot the Patreons. We forgot them. I will see you guys next time.
Kicking it with Andy. 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 Kicking it with Andy.
Just kidding. I want to see how fast that works. Okay, good. I will see.